good morning, everyone. What a beautiful winter morning. I've had 9 degrees on my car. And you know, that might not seem like a heat wave to you, but it's better than 9 below, right? Okay. All right. Tonight at 6 o'clock, want to see you back here because we have our children's Christmas program. You don't want to miss that. Grandparents and parents, of course, you won't miss it, but the rest of you, it's just a neat time to celebrate Christmas. You don't want to miss that. That'll be tonight at 6 o'clock right here. And then Wednesday night, what are we going to do Wednesday night? Caroling. You need to be in the fellowship hall at 5:30. And then we're going to have an early group that's going to go with me. And we've got a number of stops to make. We're going to be the running group. We'll be all over town. And then the other groups will be kind of in central locations. But my group's going to pick up all the stragglers, okay? So if you want to come, be here early so we can get going early. Because we found out last year that, you know, sometimes even 8 o'clock for the group that we go to, that's going to get too late. So you want to make sure that you get here as early as you can Wednesday night. Then Christmas Eve. Okay, if you haven't seen this already there in your bulletin, you need to take a look. Christmas Eve, 2 services. 2 services, okay? 4 o'clock and then 5:30 p.m. So you're going to have to make a choice this year. And we have 2 identical services. You won't miss anything if you happen to be at one and not the other. It's identical services, so we hope to see you there. Any other announcements need to be made? Ken has some things for prayer time, but any other announcements need to be made? If not, we're going to quiet our hearts for a prayer.
Oh
started clapping. Good. It's nice to see that. And, we don't have services designed for any age group. There's a lot of people that enjoy the service here. There's a lot of people that enjoy the service downstairs. And both services be honoring and pleasing to the Lord, and we celebrate them both. And thank God for that. We're going to have John and Leslie Anderson. If they would stand at this time. John and Leslie are joining us this morning. If you look in the bulletin, you'll see a lot of names of people there who are going to be joining. And John and Leslie are joining this morning. And we are so glad to have them become part of our fellowship from Peace Lutheran Church here in town. John and Leslie, I'm going to give you a membership papers here. And God bless you. Let's give them a hand. Now, downstairs, there'll be a whole lot of other people who will be joining. And if you want to become part of that, if you want to just stick around for a few minutes into second service and see that, you can, because a number of our young people are going to be joining the church by profession of faith, and we celebrate that. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Now and at the end of times. Today, our desire is to bring honor and praise to you through our songs and words of adoration. We ask that you will hear our offerings to you. We pray all these things in Christ, our Redeemer's name. Amen. Please be seated.
For many, Advent and the Christmas season is one of the most joy-filled times of the year. Decorating the Christmas tree, wrapping presents, driving around and looking at all the houses covered in lights, the smile of the bell ringers as you drop a few coins in the red kettle, and of course, the Christmas music.
Yet for some, Christmas brings a perpetual reminder, a deep feeling that something is missing or someone. Every tree, every cookie, every present, every Christmas carol is a continual reminder that season feels like it brings more sorrow than joy.
The prophet Isaiah writes, "The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear, your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you."
Then will the eyes of the blind be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool, the thirsty ground bubbling springs. In the haunts where jackals once lay, grass and weeds and papayas will grow, and a path will be there. It will be called the Holy Way of Holiness. It will be for those who walk on that way. The unclean will not journey on it. Wicked fools will not go about on it. No lion will be there, nor any ravenous beast. They will not be found there. But only the redeemed will walk there, and those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away.
As the days get closer to Christmas, the nights get longer, and the darkness seems to only lead to more darkness. And sorrow and pain seems to pile on top of more sorrow and pain. But the heart of Advent isn't about merely saying things will get better. It is about lighting candles to say the darkness does not win. The light shines brighter than the darkness, and joy will break pain. Joy will break loneliness. Joy will break sorrow, and we will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown our heads. Gladness and joy will overtake us, and sorrow and sighing will flee away.
We will light these candles to say, in the midst of fear, we will hope. In the midst of conflict, there is peace. And in the midst of sorrow, joy will shine.
Would you pray with me, please? Father, this Advent we ask that your joy would burn in our lives, that it will burn brighter than the darkness. As we light these candles, help us remember that 2,000 years ago, a child was born, and life as we know it was changed. Everything was changed. God of promise, God of hope, God of peace, God of joy, into our darkness, come.
the sheet that has the prayer stuff in it, but a couple to make mention. God, I pray that you would be with us this Christmas, this Advent, this season of anticipating of the days to come. That, like the candlelighter said, that each thing this season wouldn't be a reminder of the people that we don't have with us, but that we're here for a baby in a manger 2,000 years ago. So I pray for hope for the people that feel like they're in a place without Him, and peace for the midst of craziness of whose family do you go to, how many presents do you get, and all of those things, and for joy in the midst of a time that can be filled with sorrow. For all the medical procedures for Pam as she goes through her radiation treatments and finally get to a place where she can kind of breathe a little bit. I pray for the families that endure all those things, praying for the relief to come. So Spirit, I pray that you would bring relief. I pray that you would bring some joy this season, that when we look outside our windows, that the lights would remind us of smiles and not sadness. So Spirit, come. Amen. The deacons can come forward for this morning's offering. might have noticed that I forgot to pray for after the offering, so I'm going to do that. But Dennis, you can stay here. Dennis is actually, after last week's congregational vote, we passed the budget and everything, and then it was like, you know what? Of the many people that are members here, about a third, probably less than that, were actually at the meeting. So most of y'all didn't hear what the budget was passed. So we wanted to give Dennis some time to go through a brief kind of 4 or 5 slides of here's the way that it is, here's what you, by not coming, voted in favor of, by de facto, basically. But I want to pray for the offering. I want to pray for Dennis and receptiveness and all those things. So, God, I thank you for the things that you've given us, especially during this season, that we would have that sense inside to give back. I pray for the year ahead. I pray for the words that Dennis will say. I pray for the ears that we have so that we would hear them, and that this would be more than figures and facts on a piece of paper or on a screen, but they would be something that we really want to see your kingdom work and move and shake and do things here, so that 57th and Tomar just isn't a corner, but it's a place in Sioux Falls where people know that we follow you and that people are coming to the Lord. In your name, amen. Thank you, Dennis. You somehow have a way of making things that don't make sense at times. So I appreciate that. And Scotty, good luck, buddy. Scott's your new treasurer for next year, so the baton will be passed, or sort of is passed. But this morning we are looking at Isaiah 35. And Ron read it earlier. Actually, both of them read it earlier. But I'm going to pray, read it again, and then we'll dive right in so that I don't take up more than your hour and maybe 15 minutes. Got to stretch you a little bit sometimes. Spirit, I pray you would come. I pray that you would take these words that were written a very long time ago and write them fresh and new in our hearts and minds. That in our hearing and in their reading, the things that I will even say or all the stuff we think in between, that you would take those up to the heavens and rain them down in our ears. That it would be like a heavenly rain that trickles down into our hearts and pumps throughout our bodies, and that in your hearing, in our hearing of what you say, that we would be changed. That we wouldn't just be people that listen and don't hear, or see and don't perceive, but that we would truly be people that follow after you. And I think that you are the one that makes that happen. So Spirit, amen. The prophet Isaiah, chapter 35, and I'm going to read the first 10 verses. Actually, it's the whole chapter. The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong and do not fear, for your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, the ears of the deaf unstopped. The lame will leap like a deer, and the mute will shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool, a thirsty ground, bubbling springs. In the haunts where jackals once lay, grass and reeds and papyrus will grow, and a path will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. It will be for those who walk on that way. The unclean will not journey on it. Wicked fools will not go about on it. No lion will be there, nor any ravenous beast. They will not be found there. But only the redeemed will walk there, and those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. So we have been highlighting this aspect of a broken season. That this season is caught in a dichotomy half of the time, most of the time, between the first week was this aspect that this is supposed to be a season of hope. And the reality is, for some people, it's a season of fear. of where do I turn next? Is this really what I want? Do I really believe in this God? How do I go forth in the next days? And then that moves us into this aspect of really a conflict within this peaceful time. That you can look out the window out there and you see, oh, it's not super shining, but the snow is out and it's kind of nice. Like, even when the big crazy storm hit last year, and I guess that was this year in the spring, and all the branches were down, it was pretty. But the reality is that in the midst of all the pretty and all the nice and all the twinkling lights and the songs and everything, that there's a conflict between, do we celebrate Christmas for Christmas? Or do we celebrate Christmas for something else? Do we try and see how much money we can spend on each kid without spending too much on one, and the other one says, how come you got more presents than me? Or is it about whose family you go to? Okay, we got to go over to my parents' house on the day before Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Eve night we'll go to their church service, but then Christmas Day we'll go to your families, and then what do you eat? And what are the traditions that you have? And all that stuff gets kind of mixed in, and then I started thinking how this season is really like a nostalgic season. That when you close your eyes and you go, oh, Christmas, there are things that you think of that epitomize what Christmas is. For some, is Christmas Eve, and that you end that service with silent night and candles. For some people, you close your eyes and that's what you see, that's what you hear. For some, it's the pageant plays that the little kids do, and you're looking around waiting for who's going to be that kid that's like the crazy one up there, like pulling their shirt over their head or running around flailing, or sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes it's the food that you eat. I know for me, I remember as a kid, one of the things that always pops into my head is we were living in, I think it was either North Carolina or Tennessee, and my dad worked in the car business, and so when we were going to go on a trip, he would just go to the dealership and take one of those big old vans with TVs and Nintendos and stuff, and we just start driving. So we get in there, and I remember we were driving, and we got about halfway, and it was like crazy ice storm. So we stopped to actually stay at a hotel. And I remember looking outside the hotel window and watching this huge van that's parked like kind of up on a slope towards the door slide down and down and down and down and then sit on like a curb ditch there, and thinking, oh, are we ever going to make it to Gramps and Grandma's house? And then we make it to Gramps and Grandma's house after an extra day. And all I can remember is it was like every aunt, every uncle, every cousin, we were all there, and every uncle took turns getting out on the old W.D. Alice tractor and pulling all the kids in the sled. Like, you'd be flying along and you get these huge scratches down your arm because you wouldn't let go of the sled, and like literally the ice chunks would just tear you. Come in and have these big things, but you were having so much fun. And then I actually found a picture, Scotty. So that's my sister, and then that's the better part of me right there, from like 91, I think. And so you can tell this is Gramps and Grandma's house because it has, if the picture were kind of cropped, like this is a Davenport, like not a couch. It's the kind where like the couch part stops and then it has like a curve on it, you know. Only old people have these things. And then like the weird, what are those things on the wall and like the curtains, but you know it's Christmas because the bells are in the window and everything. And so the family's there, and for me and my sister to actually be standing beside each other is like, it must have been a good time. Because we absolutely despised each other. And then my little brother's head is down there, but this is early 90s. Okay. So those are the things that I remember. And then it's going to Gramps and Grandma's church just an eighth a mile up the road and sitting through the Christmas Eve service, which they always had like the kids program on Christmas Eve. And then you come out and you get the big old bag and it's full of peanuts, like peanuts before every kid on the planet had some sort of weird allergy. So everybody still got peanuts then. And so it was peanuts and chocolate and candies and an apple. It's like, you've got to have something good in there. Let's put an apple in there. And I remember getting that stuff and going back, and we'd tear through presents and eat all this food and candy that Grandma had spent like a month and a half making. And it's like fudge and divinity and all these cookies. And then they would make like barbecues or like made right sandwiches. And I, growing up in the South, it was like, you're gonna do what with that meat? I'm just gonna eat the cookies. And so that was Christmas. And then, December 23rd, 1996. I remember it was kind of a day like this, where there was snow on the ground. It was kind of a fresh snow. And my family was living in kind of a typical farmhouse. And I remember sitting at the computer, playing a computer game. I remember 1996 is like before broadband internet for sure, and like dial-up was very sketchy. And in Georgia, Iowa, if you wanted dial-up internet, you probably had to play long-distance fees to Sioux Falls to actually get it. And so I was probably playing like one of those snake games where like you go around and you like eat the apple and it just gets bigger and bigger. And I remember playing that on the computer, my dad coming up and said, "Hey, I love you, I'm going to head to town." "Okay, see you later." And a while goes by and my stepmom comes in and she's like, "Hey, I think your dad's stuck. Will you go out and check on him?" "Yeah." And I remember because I was one of those like goofy pothead snowboarder kids at the time, and so they bought me this new snowboarding coat. And I remember putting the pullover long, like super thin but really warm coat on. It was all white, and I had my like goofy looking hat, and put my boots on. I'm walking out, and it's like I can remember the snow when you step on it, how it makes that like it's literally like squishing between every groove on your foot because it's fresh. And walking out and realizing the car's not stuck. And all the windows are frosted over. And from that point on, Christmas was never the same. My dad had committed suicide. And Christmas as a little kid at the farm was no longer there. This was the 23rd of December. I don't even remember what Christmas Day was. I don't remember it at all. I'm sure I was at my grandparents' house. I remember packing my bag, leaving my stepmom and stuff, and heading to Gramps and Grandma's. And before long, it was heading back to Chicago. But it was one of those where, now when I look back, we had some friends over last night, and we were talking about Christmas, and they had experienced loss. And we're sitting there, and we're talking, and Carrie told me that my grandparents said it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I actually was like jovial during Christmas. And it wasn't a cognitive thing. I wasn't like, "Oh, Christmas, bah humbug." But it was something in me. Christmas wasn't Christmas anymore. All those memories that you have of a kid, of me hanging on to the sled, flying down the back area where the pigs are, and all this stuff, suddenly were gone. And it was, Christmas. Now here's the thing. There are people here. You can look to your left and look to your right, look behind you, that they have experienced loss. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a spouse. Maybe it's a parent or a grandparent or a child. And you know what? Every single time you see this, every single time you put something on there, that's a reminder that they're not here. Every single time we light these candles, or you sing the songs, or you go out and the bell ringer's going, all of those things that are supposed to be the epitome of joy. This is a great and joyful season, says, do you remember December 23rd, 1996? Yeah, I do. Now, the Israelites were living in a state of constant fear and constant conflict. Assyria is banging at the door saying, "We're coming to take you." In the next chapters, they even come, and it's like in the movies, where the general from Assyria comes and stands before all the Israelites, and the Israelites leaders say, "Will you talk to us in Aramaic so that they don't hear the things you're going to say?" And he's like, "Nope, I'm talking to those people because they're the ones that are going to get taken." They were scared. There was no joy. Now this is pre any Christmas season. This is everyday life. For us, the heightened joy, the heightened fun, the heightened element that Advent brings also brings the heightened element of sorrow and being sad and having to deal with that pain. Now here's the thing that you have to hear. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to have sorrow. It's okay when everybody wants to have a great time for you to just say, you know what? Today is not the day. That is okay. But you also have to hear that there is joy in this season. That we light that candle to say that darkness inside does not win. That 2,000 years ago, a strange coincidence and an awkward thing that seemed like nothing really mattered, and all these different things come together because the fullness of time happened. And a baby was born and put in a manger. And everything has changed since then. So that we can read these things, and it says, the lame will leap like a deer. The mute will shout. The blind will see. The deaf will hear. It will be different. Now here's the thing. You have to choose for it to be different. You have to choose for it to be different. Our friends that were over last night, when she was asking me, because I said I'm going to be talking about sorrow and joy, and she's like, what are you going to talk about? Like, what's the point? Because we're not going to come. We have something else we're going to do. And I said, you have to choose. And she's like, you're right. Every day I have to choose hope. Every day I have to choose that there's peace in my life. Every day I have to choose that I'm going to be joyful. And some days I choose not to. But somewhere in the midst of this, we have to choose that we're going to be joyful. And then the question is, so what does it look like? How does that come about? And if you have your Bible yet, it's still there somewhere, but I'll highlight some things. In verse 2, the crocus will bloom and it will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. Rejoice greatly and shout for joy. In verse 6, the lame will leap like a deer and the mute tongue will shout for joy. At the very end, in verse 10, then they will enter Zion with singing, shouting for joy. These are all derivatives of the same word. In the Hebrew, this comes from like the root is like ra. And some of them are a little different tenses, but the gist is ra. Now think about if you were in an army, what's the thing that you shout before you march the line? Rah! Or a football game, and so I have this, I'm going through and I'm like, rah, rah, rah. I'm like, whoa, that's kind of, okay. And then I thought of this video clip, and typically I don't show video clips, I'd rather tell it to you, but it was one that had too many different dynamics to actually not show it, so I'm going to take about 3 minutes in.
No other way for the women and children to get out of the caves. Is there no other way?
There is one passage. It leads into the mountains. But they will not get far. The Uruk-hai are too many.
Send word for the women and children to make for the mountain pass and barricade the entrance.
So much death. What can man do against such reckless hate?
Right out. Right out and meet for death and glory. No. People whose sun is rising. Look to my coming, that
first light on the fifth day, at dawn, look to the east.
Yes. Yes.
The horn of Al-Hanahan shall sound in the deep. One last time. Yes.
Let this be the hour when we draw swords together. Verdi is awake.
Al-Haran, Al-Ruin, and the Red Gold.
Then the king will stand alone. Not alone. Look here!
I thought it was one of those things where it gave you a practical picture of what Israel probably was dealing with. The barbarian horde knocking at its door. Or even for us, feeling that sorrow, being tucked inside the deepest, darkest back place, boarded up inside of the keep, knowing that the monsters are out there. That the monsters are all of those sorrows and the depression and all the stuff that Christmas can bring along with the joy. And eventually we have to say, let's ride out and meet it. We can sit inside this dark place and just sit. Or we can run out and fight headlong. And then eventually what happens? The light comes over the mountain. This brings us back to the first week. Look to the great and holy mountain and you will find hope. And the light will dawn. And it comes down and darkness cannot stand. Sorrow cannot stand in that place. And now you're asking me, so how do we practically do this? I'm going to give you one task to do. And this seems maybe kind of trite and trivial and maybe childish at times, but sing. That's what it says in this passage, that eventually you will enter Zion singing with great shouts of joy. And then let yourself be overcome. The line says right there, everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them. Be overtaken by joy. Let it reign over you. That's why the Christmas season has carols. That's why we have these songs. That's why on Wednesday night, when we go around singing to all these people, that fills them with joy because it brings back all of those memories of nostalgia of what Christmas is. And those memories fight off off those bad memories with a sword. And joy wins. But you have to let it overtake you. You have to be willing to act a little childish, or like Buddy the Elf. The best way to spread Christmas cheer is to sing loud for all to hear. I was going to play that video too, but I thought it would be a little distracting. But it's true. As obnoxious and strange as it seems, sometimes just acting like a little kid does make sense. Because that's what Christmas is about. Those things that you remember from your childhood, not the things that you think of that are missing. It's acknowledging them, but saying, those are not the things that will hold me. Joy will be my crown.